Hi, we're live from Luo's. I'm Bob Uphues. This is Brett McNeil, and we are here with Meathead Goldwyn, who last year published his eponymous book, Meathead, The Science of Great Barbecue and Grilling. Thanks a lot for being here.
Well, thank you. My pleasure. It's always good to hang with you, Bob.
The last time I spent any long time together was in your backyard.
Yeah.
You were doing
I was doing some ribs on camera, so we can't keep on meeting like this.
So, how has the last year been for you? This book came out sort of Father's Day-ish or something.
Yeah,
like
right
that.
around May 10. May 10.
Okay, and so it's been kind of a whirlwind.
It has. I knew it would be a popular book, but I had no idea it would be that popular. So it's got just a little more than a year, and it's sold over 100,000 copies, and it's in every bookstore practically. My friends keep sending me pictures of Barnes & Noble with them stacked up. It was the #2 cookbook on Amazon last year. I got beat by Chrissy Teigen, whose cover photo had cleavage, we'll call it. And how do you compare that with cleavage? A grizzled old gray guy.
So how, of those 100,000 books, how many do you think were purchased by women?
Boy, that's an interesting question. I can't answer that directly because I'm sure a lot of them were Father's Day gifts and stuff like that. But I know that I also run a website called AmazingRibs.com, and it's really popular barbecue and grilling website. Last year, 34 million page views, and about 80% of the traffic is male. So we're running about 80-20, but I think the number is creeping up. So, and we've talked about this. Next year on National Women's Day, we're going to try to explain to women that, well, no, I mean, this is like the last male bastion. Right. There are darn few golf clubs now that won't let women in. Most bars, that used to be men only in clubs, women are in. So, but the backyard grill is still like the guy thing.
Why is that? I mean, when we were planning to sit down with you, it is the last domain for men. But why is it dominated? Baking is,
well, that's still pretty much. Yeah, I think that's still pretty much for the. I can't say for sure. I'm not a social scientist, but I have a theory. You go right for the hard questions. I mean, ask me something I know the answer to. But no. My theory is that. Well, I mean, you go back to caveman,
fire.
and the guy was the hunter, though. The women were the pit masters. The women ran kept the fire alive while the guys were out, chasing wild hogs and being chased by saber-toothed tigers. And but somehow or other, we got control of the fire and the remote control. And I think that. I think women have allowed that secretly. I think they get together and they say, let them have the grill so that they can have their own space. Get them the heck out of the kitchen. And I think it's kind of like faking orgasm. They just want us to feel like we're successful at something and we're good at something. And I don't know. I don't know. That's my best guess.
Hey, you know what? I wanted to kind of go back a little bit here because the first time that I came in contact with you more than a decade ago was not as a barbecue master or a cookbook writer, but as an artist.
Yeah. That's right. You guys did a feature on me when I was in my art world.
That's right. And you have a degree from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago.
Yes.
Tell us about that and how did that translate into what you're doing?
We go back a ways too, and I'm glad. I must say, it's a mutual admiration. I know you admire my work. I know you cook from my recipes,
I do.
And I'm just a huge fan of the Landmark. And you can edit this out if you want, but the other newspaper in town is just terrible compared to the Landmark. He's heard me rant about this before. You just see the gap between the Landmark and the suburban life growing every day, and what Bob is doing and his professionalism and the team he's built is just so much difference. Because I was a journalism major in college, And I wrote for the Chicago Tribune for 3 years. I had a column about food and drink, and the Washington Post. So I have a little sense for what goes on in the newspaper world, and so it is mutual. And what you've done is just tremendous, and I like reading it. So
Well, the check will be in the mail.
no, you bought lunch, didn't you? You bought lunch. This is how I'm paying for lunch. I've always had a love of art. In fact, it's a funny story. It goes back to before I was born. My mom and dad lived in Chicago. My dad was a food scientist. His specialty was frozen foods. Now, this goes back into the late 40s, right after the war. Mm-hmm. He came back on the GI Bill, went to NYU and a branch of Cornell and studied food science, and went to work for Clarence Birdseye, who was a pioneer in frozen foods. And they moved him to Chicago, and Mom was pregnant, and she wanted me to be born at Michael Reese Hospital. While she was pregnant, she used to go to the Art Institute and hang out in front of the Lautrec painting at the Moulin Rouge. And it's if you've ever been there, it's a very large canvas, and there's this one woman with a sort of a greenish face, and it's just looks like one heck of a party going on there. And I took an interest in art naturally through to Mom, and Dad is the one who taught me to grill. I used to hang out back with him when he was grilling and watch him, and the smell, the sizzle, the steak, and he'd let me have a sip of beer every now and then, which was probably part of the attraction of the endeavor. I went to University of Florida, got my degree in journalism, and then I hit the road and ended up in Chicago, and I wanted to get into the School of the Art Institute, and I applied there, and while I was waiting for them to tell me, I would cruise the Art Institute and study the artwork, and I would sit down and read a book in front of this painting, and it was At the Moulin Rouge by Lautrec, the same painting my mom used to sit down in front of reading books when she was pregnant with me. So I was imprinted on Chicago, the School of Art Institute, and the Art Institute and Lautrec before birth. And I went to this school and got my master's in what is now called art and technology. They called it generative systems in those days. And we were experimenting in the mid-'70s with computers and lasers and holograms and the techie stuff that is quite common now, but it was unusual in those days. And it turns out I got the world's first master's degree in art and science. So the science part of the science of barbecue and grilling extends back into my art days. And I had, when we first met, I had a magazine about wine. I was the wine critic for the Tribune and the Washington Post. I learned to drink in college, like most all-American boys. And
they typically
a palate.
Yeah,
college,
I
right?
don't know. That's pretty sophisticated.
We were
It was
drinking,
Blatz.
I got
There's,
pretty good.
Bud Light
Well, it
and
started on
Blossom.
Ripple and Boone's Farm, of course, but it progressed. I mean, I worked in a liquor store, and I started tasting the fine wines for holidays. For Easter, I bought a bottle of Chateau Carbagnon Blanc, 1967. It was just unbelievable, and I realized there was something special about this. And I was always interested in food and drink, and so I had gotten deep into it, wrote about wine, started a magazine, and I sold the magazine in 2001 and decided, okay, now I'm going to be an artist. I did all that art studying and stuff, and I was working at being an artist when we met, and you sent the reporter out and wrote about me because I was working with 3D photography. I was doing virtual reality and 3D in the early 2000s. Before anybody caught on. I mean, there was nobody doing VR in those days. And I actually still have a website called Spinography and another website called Stereographer, both devoted to, I don't maintain them anymore, but so I've been a pioneer in a lot of stuff that failed.
But Meathead, that seems to have struck a chord. That seems to have been your home run. How did that all sort of evolve?
Well, I had been involved in wine for 18 years. I one of the trade magazines ranked me as one of the 10 most influential wine people in the world. So I had climbed the ladder, and it was getting really precious up there. I mean, the wine people like to say, "Oh no, it's not snobby. Just that's all a preconceived." It's snobby, and it was getting too much for me, and I just wanted. And I was also drinking too much. I mean, I decided to switch to solid food. And so I started. One of my neighbors was a butcher, and we were just yakking over the fence one day, bragging about how good our ribs were. And somebody challenged somebody to a cook-off, and the next thing we know, we're both getting ready for this big cook-off. And this is back around the year 2004 or so. And I went to Amazon to buy a book on smoking and grilling to up my game, and there was nothing. There was nothing. So I said, all right, that's it. I'm going to build a website about barbecue, and because this is going to be hot. This barbecue stuff is going to catch on, and I'm going to be the first one there. And I named it AmazingRibs.com because in those days, websites were listed alphabetically, and books were listed on Amazon alphabetically. I mean, there was no Google. And so I was starting with an A. Mm-hmm. And it was all about ribs, and then we just started expanding, and I started covering steak and pulled pork and hot dogs and anything. It just covers all sorts of outdoor cooking. We're doing campfire. We're doing stuff with sous vide first and then on the grill. So we're just having all kinds of fun.
And the book, how did that get going? What was the process for writing that, and how long did it take?
Well, when I discovered in 2004, after the big challenge, that there were no real good books on barbecue, I said, well, I'm going to write a book. I was a journalism major. I knew photography. I actually studied with a great photographer named Jerry Uhlsman as an undergrad, and then I got my master's in visual arts, and I ran Amazon's AOL. I ran AOL's food and drink section for 9 years, so I knew a little bit about internet. And in those days there was no World Wide Web. It was just AOL. AOL was like Facebook. They ruled the world, and I ran their whole food and drink section. And so I had this set of skills: writing, photography, and internet, or AOL. And it just made sense to jump into the internet. And so I built a website, and it took off. In 5 years, it was, I had planned on writing a book, but the website was making money. I was making a living. So I was what writers often call gathering string for a book. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, what I'll do is like crowdsource. I'll just write the book, publish it online, and gather all this information online and hear feedback from people and corrections. And in the process, one of the readers was a physicist, a guy named Dr. Greg Blonder. And he was the head of research at Bell Labs, which old-timers like me will remember. Bell Labs was where they invented the transistor. Bell Labs was the numero uno world technology research center, founded by Alexander Graham Bell. It was, he was really into barbecue and all manner of food, and he found some errors on my writing, and I had an interest in the science, and he corrected them, and we started a collaboration, and his name is on the cover there. It's by Meathead Goldwyn, and in small letters by Greg Blonder, PhD, but he's our science advisor, and he's a great inspiration to me, and it keeps me factually correct, and he does research for us, and he's just a fascinating guy. He's at Boston University now. And so the book and the website took a strong right turn in the area of science, because I was always a bit of a nerd, and I had worked in art in science. And I was just curious about what is fire, mm-hmm. What is smoke, what happens to protein when fire hits it, what happens to carbohydrates, what happens to fats. And so I started digging.
Speaking of your website, your website is a successful website. I mean, you have been able to monetize a website, and if someone who works in an industry that has had really poor success
right.
in monetizing websites, tell me how your website works.
Well, our model might be applicable to a small town newspaper. We built the website, and it was every year the usage chart was going up, and it was all free. And we were making some money from advertising, and in those early days, advertising revenue was reasonable. I mean, the advertising people were looking for ways to target audiences, so we had ads from food companies, Purdue Chicken and stuff like that, and they felt like this was an alternative to broadcast and newspaper, where you reach a large number of people who aren't necessarily interested. And but in recent years, supply and demand has hit. Which is to say, there are a gazillion food blogs out there. Now, we rank in the top 20 of all food websites in the country. But because the real estate is so much, and the pricing has been driven down. And Google has stepped into the game with a bidding program. So people can now bid on website advertising, and that's driven the price down. Very hard for a blogger or a newspaper or anybody to make a living on advertising on the internet. And about 4 years ago, we came up with the idea of leaving most of the website free. And we toyed with putting a paywall around, like the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal did. But we wanted people to learn, and I enjoy teaching, and I love the contact with people, and they were helping me. So we set up a portion of the website that is pay, and it's a forum. It's a place for people to have civilized discussion and debate, which is not what always happens on newspaper websites.
Very true.
And we have moderators who make sure it stays civilized. And I tell you, after
people get that excited about their barbecuing on your
after politics, barbecue debates often end in gunplay. You do not want to go into a bar and start a discussion as to what's better, Texas barbecue or North Carolina barbecue. And they'll haul you out into the alley and beat you up like Cicero politics. Now,
I'm going to jump in, but we think of like Texas, Arkansas, Memphis is a big barbecue town.
Yes.
You are the king of backyard barbecue in Brookfield, Illinois. It's a little incongruous. Do you get any pushback from Southern men who have strong opinions about what barbecue is and what barbecue ain't?
I did it at the early stages, but I've earned my stripes. Because we've got deep into the science, we've learned a lot. One of the things the book and the website do is we debunk a lot of mythology. For example, easy one. All the barbecue books tell you to get smoke flavor, you use wood chips. Mm-hmm. And before you throw the wood chips on the fire, you soak them for an hour or two. That's right. General wisdom. Bad advice. It doesn't work. First of all, if you soak wood, it doesn't absorb water. That's why they build boats out of wood, because it doesn't absorb water. And we simply took the wood chips and the chunks and weighed them, soaked them in water, shook them off, and patted the surface water off, and weighed them again. And there was like a 3% weight gain. Okay. Then we cut them open and looked at the inside. All the moisture was right there in the fuzzy stuff on the surface. So what happens when you throw wet wood on charcoal? The first thing that happens is it boils off. Yeah. Water boils at 212. Wood combusts at 575. So the wood cannot start smoking until it boils off the water. So now you've thrown wet wood on hot coals, which hopefully you've stabilized at the right temperature you want to cook at, because temperature control is the core key to good outdoor cooking or indoor cooking. And you've thrown wet wood on your charcoal, messed up your temperature control, and all that smoke you see is steam. And all you got to do is hold a mirror up, and that'll tell you it's steam. It's not smoke. And that all has to boil off before it can start smoking. You go to any barbecue competition, You go to any Texas pitmaster or any barbecue restaurant, they don't soak the wood. Nobody soaks wood in the no pros do. So and now people say, well, I put my wood chips on the fire and they catch on fire. What do? How do I want smoke? No, you don't. Visible smoke doesn't taste as good as invisible smoke. The holy grail of barbecue is what they call blue smoke. The particle size is so small, it doesn't refract light. You look at the chimney of these big pits that these competition barbecue guys cook on, and you can see right through the what comes out of the chimney. You don't see the smoke. No billowing white smoke. The billowing white smoke comes from when the wood is starving for oxygen. It's suffocating and it's smoldering. And it makes a good flavor, but it's not as good as blue smoke. And the way you get blue smoke is let it burn. Let it catch on fire. Let's see yellow flames coming from, because those yellow flames are the visible evidence of burning impurities. And there's all kinds of impurities like creosote and other things in there, and that burns them up. So we figured all this stuff out and debunked that myth. And there are a bunch of other myths that we all learned from Dad.
Right. We're doing it wrong. That's what
That we're and because we're in an age of technology now, and we have instruments and we have science to learn from. I mean, even French cuisine has been altered by what we've learned about technology. There's this whole movement out there among culinary artists towards the culinary sciences. And just like in the art world, you have the Impressionists and the Modernists and the Fauvists. In the food world, we have the Nerdists. And there's a bunch of them. Kenji Lopez-Alt, Christopher Kimball, used to be at Cook's Illustrated. He's now at Milk Street. Alton Brown, Harold McGee. There's maybe a dozen of us. And this is an age of technology. People want to know why. They don't want a recipe that just says, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. They want to know, why do I do this? And what happens if I don't do this? And so the first half of this book is like a textbook. It explains why. And it really, it explains what is fire, what is smoke, what is food science.
You're talking about a difference between a recipe book and like a knowledge book, is right?
Yes.
And
yes.
What I want to talk about a little bit is, does making backyard cooking or outdoor cooking, which is really about fun, does making it scientific take some of the fun out of it? Does it make it more serious? I think of one reason I don't like baking is I don't want to measure every damn thing. I don't want to do all the math.
Yeah.
I like sitting outside drinking a Amstel Light, cooking over a hot fire. Does the science of scientific barbecue mitigate, or I don't know, how does that inform the fun of?
I'm sure it puts some people off, but you know what? It is fun, and it's more fun when the food tastes good. Okay. And nobody likes a burnt black hockey puck for a hamburger. Right. And there are tricks to make great hamburgers, and it involves a little food science. And we explain that in here, and also making a safe and juicy hamburger. And we explain how to do that. And the core principles aren't that complicated. And the fact that we had 34 million page views last year, that we have 15,000 people who paid to join our Pitmaster Club, the pay portion of our website, means that there are a lot of people who want to learn. They want to. They want, and I get email every day. When I was young, and I was in high school, like so many others, I wanted to change the world. I wanted to be a big guy, an important guy who could improve humanity. I was going to make the world a better place. And I got to college and I realized, well, I'm maybe not such a hot shot as I thought I was in high school, where I was, in my top 10 or so. Right. I got to college and I was among a bunch of other people who were in their top 10, and I was, not as smart as I thought I was. And it got a lot more competitive. And I got out into the workplace and it was even more competitive. And it was a bit of a slog for a while. And I realized that I wasn't going to have this impact on humanity until I got into barbecue. And every single day, and I'm not lying, and I swear it's true, I get email from somebody or a post on the website saying, "You've changed my life. You've made me a better cook." The kids all ask now, "Can Daddy cook tonight?" My wife, I got lucky last night because of what the recipe that I cooked from you.
Ancillary benefits of good butter.
I had the boss over. I mean, and I get some of them are funny tales. Funny tales.
Do you find people? My neighbor, he can cook Mexican food all day long in the kitchen. He is so nervous about the barbecue. He won't go near it. It scares him.
A lot of people are. So I can unscare him. I mean, some basic core concepts. We can dive into some of them if you want.
You know, I do want to ask this really important basic question, which is gas or charcoal. I have my own opinions about this.
I'm a charcoal guy.
I'm a charcoal guy.
All the way.
But are you primarily, we were talking about smoking, you're not smoking on a gas grill.
Yeah.
You are?
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you, where do you fall on that? Or are you agnostic?
I'm agnostic. First of all, I try everything. And I have to, when I'm developing recipes, I have to test it on a gas grill. I have to test it on a charcoal grill. I have to test them on smokers. I have to test them on log smokers, on pellet smokers, on gas smokers. I have one of each. My deck is on the verge of collapse. My wife has laid down the law. One comes in, one goes out. I mean, I have a very expensive Weber gas grill in the garage right now. And I had it there. I was testing it for about a month or two, and I'm done with it. I'm waiting for them to come get it. I'm giving away or giving back $1,000 gas grill. There are things that they each does differently, and each does especially well. There are some things that one does better than the other. I cook all my steaks on charcoal. Charcoal, for the real advantage to charcoal is it gets hotter. Excuse me. It gets hotter than gas. Now, some gas grills now have what they call sear burners, but most gas grills cannot get a good dark sear on a steak. And you want your steak to be dark brown on the surface, all over, not just cross marks. There's another myth that we've debunked: the hatch marks, the grill marks. The brown is beautiful. The brown flavor is caused by a chemical reaction called the Maillard reaction, and it's protein and amino acids and reducing sugars, and they change with heat, and they create flavor. And it's the browning process. Same reason we roast coffee beans. Same reason we toast bread. It's a reaction called the Maillard reaction, first identified by a French scientist named Maillard. And so you just can't get a really good dark brown crust on most gas grills. So if you love steaks, you can do better on a $30 hibachi than you can on a $300 or a $3,000 gas grill in most cases. But when you really, really need fingertip control of temperature, which you often do, like chicken skin. How many people in this listening audience, raise your hand, have turned a beautiful chicken into a black carcass? You know, I mean,
Right, sure.
yeah, I mean, it's the bane, and there's a very simple way to prevent that. And gas grills are really helpful at that. You can do them on charcoal grills also. And gas grills are more convenient. I mean, Tuesday night you come home from work and it's a gorgeous evening and the fireflies are flickering and you just throw a couple of chicken pieces on the grill and 30 minutes later everybody's eating and drinking and sitting out back and having a great time. And you don't have to fuss with charcoal. So I like them both, and I use them both. I think there are certain cases when one works better than the other. And yes, you can smoke on a gas grill. I hinted earlier that I can give a couple of tips, but let me do that right now because there is one tip that I will. There are two tips I want to share with the audience that will improve their cooking overnight, just instantly. Number one, digital thermometer. Cooking is all about temperature and control of temperature. Now, that dial thermometer in the top of your gas grill is a worthless piece of junk. Even on expensive grills, it's the least expensive item that the manufacturer can buy. And it's an old technology, more than 100 years old, and it's not accurate. And it can't tell you what the temperature of the food is. First of all, it's up here in the dome,
Right.
while the food is down here, and the temperature is heat rises. It's different up here than it is down here. You need to know the temperature down here where the food is. And so you need a digital thermometer that will tell you precisely, not roughly. And this thing, we've tested them. They're often off by 50 to 75 degrees. I've seen them as much as 100 degrees. Can you imagine going indoors and cooking in your indoors oven when it was off by 100 degrees, 75 degrees, 50 degrees is common?
Right.
You can't cook under those circumstances. So you need a thermometer, and they make them with a probe on a cable, on a wire, and then the electronics. The probe sits in the grill next to the meat. And some of them have two probes. You can put the probe in the meat and another probe next to the meat. So you can measure the ambient air temp and the meat temp. And that's the other one that we're going to talk about in a minute. And it has all the electronics outside the grill. And you can get those for like $50. So that, boom,
Pretty good
overnight, you're a better cook. An instant read digital thermometer. And they're $30 for one that will give you a precise temperature. Stick it in the meat. Put it all the way through and then ease it out, and you get an exact measurement from top to bottom. They read precisely in 4 seconds for $30. If you want one that reads in 2 seconds, it'll cost you $100. We've got an electrical engineer that tests thermometers for us because there's a bunch of them on the market. So come to our website, find one that you like, order it from Amazon, or go down or if you're in the hardware store, take out your phone, come to our website, read our thermometer ratings before you buy it. But almost any digital thermometer will up your game instantly, because a perfectly cooked steak is 130 to 135 degrees. That's medium rare. Medium rare is when a steak is its most tender and its most juicy. You cook it anymore, and it starts to get harder and drier. And now if you like it medium or even well done, even then with a digital thermometer, you know precisely what the correct temperature is. You can take the meat off, and if Uncle Charlie wants his steak well done, and Aunt Molly likes her steak medium, and you like yours medium rare, you can nail them all. And isn't it tiresome to have to serve a bunch of steaks and say, "Oh, geez, I'm sorry, it kind of got away from me," Hamburgers. Now, chicken. Consumer Reports did a research project a couple of years ago where they tested 300 chicken breasts all across the nation, and 90% of them had pathogenic bacteria. And of those 90%, half of those, 45% of the total, had antibiotic-resistant pathogens. No problem. Cook it to a safe temperature, 160 to 165 degrees. Boom, they're all dead. And you can actually get away with cooking to lower temperatures if you hold them at that temperature a little longer. And we discussed this time and temp correlation in the book, and that's not on the USDA website. Temperature control and having good thermometers will instantly make you a better cook. The other core concept I wanted to tell folks is two-zone cooking, whether you're on a gas grill or a charcoal grill. You want to put all your charcoal on one side and none on the other. Or if you've got more than one burner, turn one burner on and leave the other burner off, or two burners on and one burner off, or one burner on and two burners off. You'll learn, but you want to cook most of your food in the off zone, in the indirect zone.
Yeah.
Indirect heat. That's convection airflow. Sorry. That's convection airflow. I did it again. It's convection airflow, and it's cooking gently by warm air. Guys cook too hot, too fast.
Burning.
We put pedal to the metal. Give it all she's got, Scotty.
And then it's like raw on the inside and burnt on the outside.
Right, yeah. You've got to slow it down, because it takes time for heat to penetrate meat. Meat is 70% water. And vegetables are 80% water. It takes time for that heat to go through the meat from the outside to the center. And if you're really, really hot, you overcook the outside, and that's what happens to your chickens.
Right.
You burn the chicken, and you don't, and the inside is not cooked. So you're going to cook it over here where it's gentle heat. You're not going to burn anything. Now,
what does that do? I mean, back to somebody who's maybe impatient and worried about getting food on the table, especially if they had to fire up a charcoal. What does that do for the time that you're investing in cooking the chicken indirectly?
well, I think you just need to make a decision. Do you want good food or you want fast food?
Right.
I mean, it's just fast food is fast food, even in the backyard. It takes time to cook properly, and you just need to slow it down, turn the temperature down, take your time, start cooking a little earlier. Now, if you're cooking over here on the indirect side, you're cooking by convection airflow. But if you want that great sear, now you have to move it over here to get the sear. And most books tell you sear it first and then move it. That's backwards. You start over here on the indirect side and you gently warm the interior until the interior is almost perfect. And then you move it over to the hot side, because that's radiant heat. That's infrared heat. And it's very powerful, much more powerful than the convection heat. And that radiant heat will give you your sear. But heat is energy. And that energy pounds the surface. And if you start the food over here, you're building up energy in the surface of the meat. And then if you move it over here, while the energy is in the surface of the meat, it starts creeping towards the center. So when you slice open that steak, you've got a beautiful dark crust. Then you got a layer of brown just below. Then you got a layer of tan just below. Then a layer of pink just below. And finally in the center, you got perfectly medium rare. But if you start it on the indirect side, if you start it gentle, you can get it even temperature throughout. And if you're shooting for 130 to 135, which is your perfect medium rare steak, you bring it up to about 120 or 125. Then you put it over on the direct radiant heat side and pound the surface, and you lift the lid. So it's cooking on one side only. And you're just pounding that surface with energy. And you know what? Remember all the textbooks say leave it there and don't flip it? It's wrong. Flip it. Because it's building up energy, and you don't want to store the energy. You're just browning the surface. And you flip it. And you become a human rotisserie. And you flip that sucker every couple of minutes. You're flipping it a lot. And in the process, you're browning the entire surface, not just grill marks. So you get more flavor. And that energy that builds up from the direct radiant heat now bleeds off into the atmosphere instead of going down into the meat and overcooking the meat. And so you're cooking the inside over here and the outside over here. You're cooking it in two steps. And now you take your chicken and you put it over here and gently roast it over here until it's about 150, 160 to 165 is our target. And you cook it gently over here, and then you bring it over here, lift the lid, and now you get that skin crispy. Now you build that crust. Now you brown the other side, flip it, flip it, flip it. You don't burn the skin. You bring it up to perfect temperature. You've got juicy chicken with crispy skin.
I've been doing it wrong. I'm here first, then over, and then indirect to cook it.
Well, guess what?
I'm
He's got a copy of the book, and when we're done, you'll have I brought an extra. I'm going to get you a copy of the book.
Immediately.
I mean, now, this may sound like advanced culinary science, but it makes sense, doesn't it?
Sure.
It's really simple. And so, is that too onerous for the backyard guy who's hates or fears? It's a really simple concept. Buy a digital thermometer for the meat, another one for the oven, and just gain control and understand some basic physics.
Well, it's more, I think, people breaking with these traditional techniques that have been passed down from generation to generation, and you're afraid that oh my God, this is completely the opposite of what I had done before, so it's hard to make the break.
Well, I mean, and a lot of it is information that we've gotten wrong. For example, we've all been told bone-in steaks are better. Well, bone-in beef is better when you put it in a crock pot, because water or wine, the liquid, is a solvent, and it can get into the meat, into the bone, and pull out the flavor that's in the marrow, because that marrow is full of flavor. But when you're cooking it on a grill or in an oven,
You're not kidding.
there's calcium around that marrow. There's up to a quarter-inch layer of calcium, and calcium has no flavor. The calcium cannot improve the flavor of the steak. The bone does not make a whit of difference in quality. In fact, if anything, it can hamper the quality, because that bone can act like as a heat shield and reduce the amount of heat. The marrow remains stuck in the center in dry heat cooking. In wet heat cooking, you absolutely want the bone in. On a steak, unless you just absolutely adore gnawing on the bone does not add flavor. And if you want even cooking all the way around, take the bone off and grill the bone separately and gnaw on it yourself, or give it to the dog, or make a soup out of it. I mean, that bone, you throw it in a soup pot. Now the water will pull the flavor out. Here in the Midwest, we have a lot of people came here from Eastern Europe, particularly as we get into Cicero, Berwyn. There are a lot of Polish, Czech people. They cook ribs over there by boiling. So they put the ribs in a pot of water and they boil it, and it's served in a bowl with the water, with the boiled liquid, and it's done with cabbage and carrots and celery and potatoes and caraway seed. So they're making a stew. So a lot of people think you boil ribs, because we've learned that from our Eastern European ancestors. But when you boil ribs, that water is a solvent. It takes the flavor. And then you look, if you boil ribs, say you're going to boil ribs and then throw them on the grill like a lot of people do, look at that water.
That's where all the flavor went.
That's all the flavor.
Yeah, better be able to cook
It's
it back
left
in.
behind. You can't get it back in the meat. Yeah. So boiling ribs, the terrorists have won. Now, it's fine if you're going to do a stew, like a Polish stew or something. That's wonderful, and it's delicious. That's how you make soup. You boil bones. Right. But if you're going to grill ribs, you cook them indirect heat, really low temperature, 225, for hours, because those are really tough muscles. Really, a lot of connective tissue, a lot of fat, and a lot of what's called it's collagen. It's connective tissue, and it's elastin, which is just what it sounds like, an elastic material. And if you cook it at a low temperature or slow temperature, you gently melt it. You put it over high heat, and the protein shrinks and squeezes out all the juices, and it gets dry and tough. So low and slow, gentle, easy heat, and then you put some wood on the indirect side, dry wood, not wet wood, and fill that place with smoke. And now you've got beautiful ribs, and you can do it on a gas grill just as easy on a charcoal grill.
Do you see, and I think this might be my last question, but we're in the heart of summer grilling season. Is there a trend, like right now? What's popular? What is, what's a vanguard backyard barbecue?
Yeah, there's something really hot happening right now. Have you guys heard of Sous Vide?
Yeah.
Have you?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm going to explain it in case the readers haven't, and since you haven't. Sous vide is hot right now. Sous vide is the next hot thing. Whether it has legs, whether it'll stick, whether it's going to last a long time. It's a technique that was developed in France in the 1970s for hospitals and restaurants. And it has worked its way to a point where it's really gotten popular. And when you combine this technique of sous vide with the grill, you've really got something special. What you do when you're cooking sous vide is you take, say, a steak, and you put it in a zipper bag, and you slip it into a bowl of water or a pot of water gently, so the water squeezes out all the air. And so it's like a vacuum seal. If you've got a vacuum sealer, you can just do that. You can use a vacuum sealer and suck out the air. But you want to squeeze out the air so that the plastic bag is in contact with the meat. And then you take this gizmo, which is kind of about the size of this microphone. It's a little thicker. It looks like one of those hand mixers, like an old-fashioned flashlight, maybe 2-3 inches in diameter, and you put it in the in the pot of water, and it's called an immersion heater, and it's got a heating element in there, and it's digital, and you set the temperature. What's perfectly medium rare?
130.
130 to 135. You set it for 130. You put the meat in there, and walk away, and come back in 2 hours. Come back in 3 hours. Come back in 5 hours. You can't overcook it because it's 130 degrees. It'll never reach 131. You put a piece of steak on the grill where it's 225 over here and 500 over here. You can overcook. You better be monitoring the meat temperature. Don't have to do it here. It goes up to 130 and stays there. So if the parents are coming over for dinner and they're late, who cares? The meat can't overcook. Now, when they get there, you take it out of the bag. And it's tender and juicy because low and slow cooking tenderizes. It melts those connective tissues. And it makes it really juicy. But it's butt ugly. It's gray. It has no color. And remember, brown is beautiful. So now you fire up your grill. Get it hot as you can. Warp 10. Give it all she's got, Scotty. And you throw those suckers right over the direct radiant heat for a couple of minutes per side, flipping regularly, pounding the surface with energy, brown it, and now you've got the best of both worlds. And if you want to put a little smoke flavor in there, fantastic. So sous vide is really caught on.
The grill is just a finishing element to this.
It's a finishing element. It can be a flavoring element too. You can do things like a turkey breast, which you want to take up to 160 to 165. So you take it up to, say, 150 and pull it out and put it in the smoker. And now you're going to let it go up to 160, 165. It'll take about 20 or 30 minutes, and you've added smoke flavor. And it's so tender and juicy, it's unbelievable. Now, the sous vide machines, the reason it's taken a long time for it to catch on is they used to be big, and they used to be built into tubs and stuff, but they're now down to something that you can put in a kitchen drawer, and they're under $200. In fact, one of the manufacturers announced they're going to have one under $100. A lot of people are going to find one under the Christmas tree this year.
Okay.
It's going to be the hot Christmas gift for people who are into food, and it's kind of cool. It's like the crock pot was years ago. And you can do that. I mean, you can take a tough cut of meat, stick it in the sous vide bag, put it in there when you go to work, come home, pull it out, throw it on the grill or in a hot pan. Whip up a sauce, put your potatoes, whatever. You can put the potatoes in another bag. You can. I mean, it's just really. It's the hot. There's one that I'm really fond of now called Joule. Joule. Joule is a scientific term for measurement. And Joule, it runs by an app, either Wi-Fi or Bluetooth.
Okay.
You can check it from your desk office, from your office desk while you're at work.
Make sure that my heat bag is not over.
Right. Set the.
I really want to check in on that. Yeah. Okay, so
that's the hot trend this year.
Innovation that coming to a backyard. Actually, it sounds like a kitchen into a backyard.
Right. And you can. I mean, if with a gas grill. Really convenient if you've got a hot enough grill. If you're in the market for a gas grill, people, shoot for one that has a sear burner, something that gets really, really, really hot. And that way you can sear your sous vide, you can sear a steak. Otherwise, a $30 hibachi from Home Depot will do the job. Just throw a couple of coals on there, fire them up, and you can just sear the heck out of your steak and get a beautiful steak.
If it means that people with these giant gas grills on small balconies will use them more, then I think this is great. There's nothing sadder to me than like a balcony that is basically.
There's no balcony left. It's just a grill. That make you sad, but it makes me happy.
And maybe on that note.
Hey, thanks a lot for taking the time out and being here with us, Meathead.
And coming to
appreciate it.
Yeah, this was fun. It was a great lunch, and this is a nice restaurant, and It's always good to see you guys. Thanks very much.
Thanks for helping us.
I do a lot of interviews, and I have since the book came out. And usually they're 10 minutes, and you don't get a chance to really get into the topic. So this is a great idea. I hope it really works for you guys. I hope this. I look forward to watching the rest of them myself.
Great. Well, terrific. Thanks a lot for being here. And if people want to pick up Meathead, the Science of Great Barbecue and Grilling, you can go on Amazon. You can go to your local bookstore.
Or probably go to
It's
the
everywhere.
book table.
In LaGrange, Anderson Bookstore,
Okay.
I go in there, and in fact, I'm gonna after lunch today, I'm going down there and I sign copies. So if you want a signed copy, they're at Anderson's Bookstore in LaGrange.
Fantastic. Great.
Thanks
Thanks a
for your
lot.
time.